Hello everybody, it is currently November 22nd, and we're doing Day 9 Daily number 21. Oh yes. Setting everything up, syncing the audio, making sure there isn't any lag. Oh baby, baby, baby. Oh. Ooh, hi everyone. I'm feeling a little bit sick today. I had to wake up this morning to do a film shoot. Oh god, I can't imagine how it would be like to be a film major, but that was like terrible. So I'm like there, and some people bought goodies, and this guy bought this huge box of donut holes, and I ate one, and I was like, oh man, these are so good. It was a delicious donut hole, and it is like so easy to eat a donut hole. A little while later, I was thinking about how easy it is to eat like 30 donut holes, right? So I'm just like sitting there just horking down donut holes, right? They may as well just put a funnel in my mouth and just dump the donut holes in. And then my friend was like, hey man, let's go get some lunch at Quiznos. I'll pick everything up. What do you want? And I said, how about a turkey, bacon, and guacamole? Yeah, because I'm from America, and that's what we eat here. I mean, you Europeans, you're just like, oh, something with basil and olive oil. But no, I got meat, and green fat, right? That's what I'm all about. And of course, he was like, white or wheat? And I was like, oh, wheat, because I don't eat any of that processed shit. I'm healthy, right? So I'm washing this down with like lemonade and Coke. A cola, right? Like I'm not that suburban, sorry. And then at the end of the day, with some Cheez-Its to wrap it off and like 8 hours of standing, I'm not doing so nice. But you know what? I have dedicated myself to the Day 9 Daily, and I love doing these things. So I will do it if it means just taking a break in the bit to go vomit in the other room. But today we have an exciting, action-packed little thing-a-ring-a-roo, so hopefully I won't get too excited and just, spew into the mic, literally. So let's just go ahead and point out that we're doing RorO versus RuBy today. So let's just go ahead and transition straight into this game. This is being played on Eye of the Storm, which we've done a lot of times, so you guys should know this map by now. And if you don't, here it is. Of course I'm going to go over the map, you guys. So here's the map, here's Eye of the Storm. The most notable thing, of course, is that the natural, even though it's pretty easy to defend, you kind of have to take it because these entrances right here are impossible to like cover in any sense. So you get a lot of zealot rushes in Protoss vs. Terran, these sorts of things, and a lot of powered dragoons. Also, there's an interesting split this way as opposed to this way. As we're going to see, RorO's here and RuBy's up here. So RorO's kind of going to control this bottom half, which is a little bit unfortunate because imagine, for instance, if here was the split and RorO was here and RuBy was here, RorO would not only get to take a main up here and a main down here, as he normally would, but then he'd also secure this gas expo. If you take just this bottom half, this ends up being the expansion you have to take. Or excuse me, this is the expansion that's most reasonable to take. But it's not that big of a deal because Terran's also equally screwed. Terran would, like to take one of these at some point. But yeah, nice big open center. These ridges are the other really important thing to think about. Until you have control, so again, pretending we're RorO and we're right here, if we can control this whole area, we're good. But if we're limited back to just our natural, like if you have some stuff here, this ridge becomes very droppable. And the reason I specifically chose this game is it shows how powerful it is to be a monster in Terran vs. Zerg. To just bust out in the mid-game with a huge push, take control of the middle, start putting pressure on, and never letting up once. You demolish your opponent that way. And that's what this man succeeds in doing. Now, I will admit, I've always liked RuBy as a player, even when he was on NBC Game Hero. One of my favorite games was RuBy against Anytime on Andromeda, where RuBy did this unbelievably suave medic marine play and just snapped Anytime in half like a baby carrot. That was always fun to see. So already we have some cool action going down. One might ask, why was that first supply depot built in the main as opposed to down here? Sort of completing this wall. And I don't exactly have a good answer for that. I think it's because you can still send a scouting SCV out. You don't have to worry about that sort of obnoxiousness. And also, if something goes wrong at the front, maybe he'll be lifting. but probably just the maneuverability at the start and the fact that you're going to be building your second supply depot there anyways, as our friendly observer box right there. Not the hugest deal. RorO, doing the usual sort of thing, expanding. I just briefly want to note this scouting direction. I talked a little bit about this in Mine vs. Hogel and Flash vs. Hogel, but if you scout directly towards the main, like let's say you do scout Terran correctly first and you get here, where are you going to go, right? You kind of have to fly over dangerous territory until you get to here. Scouting your opponent directly first is not exactly useful. But if we scout up here, we can spot any sort of weird proxy action, any stuff being built in the middle. And if we're here, if we've sent our Overlord about to here, no matter where our opponent ends up being, we can go to his natural here, here, or here above the cliff very quickly. We can get in position super fast, and it's little things like that you do in the early game that make you have a much higher chance to win later on, and help make you look resoundingly baller, as a British person might say. And in case any of you think that I just made that up, I actually did hear a British person originally say that. So big thanks for that. That was a good little use of that bit of humor. Yep. So we have the drone doing a little harass-a-roo, just poking around. It's good to wall in the drone if you can. I mean, obviously these sorts of things, I would never rush to do these sorts of things. I mean, that's kind of an extreme example, someone like being like, oh my god, I gotta build my supply depot now to wall this drone in. But it's generally when you have like attacking units pinned in your main in some circumstance, doing little things like this, like cutting off the exit path, is very useful. But never panic and try to do any of that too quickly. And I think that's a reasonably important thing to note. Just always being patient and calm and thinking clear-headedly in these sorts of circumstances. Oh, and this is a question that someone asked me earlier that I actually thought would be useful to bring up. They asked how they deal with panicking in a game, like being so flooded with adrenaline that they start making mistakes. What happens when you have adrenaline is that, for instance, let's say I'm looking right here in the middle of the screen. If I'm calm, I'm aware of all this stuff that's going on across the whole screen. But when you start getting pumped full of adrenaline, your brain literally zeroes in exactly where you're looking at, and all this stuff around the edges starts getting really fuzzy in terms of your vision. So what I recommended doing was physically turning your head away from the monitor and physically turning your head rapidly down to the minimap and up here to help combat that tunnel vision that happens. And that helps build your awareness of everything that's going on. And really, as long as you're aware of the minimap, you're aware of the entire scope of the game. So that becomes very, very key to sort of combating that flood of adrenaline you'll experience. The usual sort of thing going on from our neighborhood friend RoRo. He's expanding, he's going for the third hatch early on. 4 lings is a pretty key number early on. You never really want to be making more than 6. Even 6 feels very extreme to me. I make 2 or 4 against a Terran opponent. And almost always I'm sending a Zergling to my opponent unless I know precisely what he's doing. And fortunately for RoRo, he does know precisely what's going on. I mean, we have the wall off here, he saw the command center going down there. But if you don't know precisely what your Terran opponent's doing, send a Zergling there right away, because I cannot tell you how easy it is to lose to a Terran who just suddenly moves out with like 7 Marines and 10 SCVs. And it's also embarrassing. And the most important part of any game of StarCraft is not to look stupid. Oh, if you do, just hope the other person didn't have his auto replay on. Oof. The usual sort of drone production going on. Nothing too drastic going on. And that's actually, again, part of the reason why I chose this game, is because it's so normal at the start. It is so run-of-the-mill. And not even like, you know, 2006, 2000 run-of-the-mill. We're talking about, like, the play that people have been doing since 03 and 04 style run-of-the-mill. It's been run-of-the-mill as long as some of you have even been in the community. And yet it turns into such a sweet game later on. This, I suppose, is a little different. Doing so much tech stuff. When you're this walled in, you can get the engineering bay early, and then we're getting the academy a little later. We're getting this factory down already. I would still label that as super duper duper normal. But what we're going to see be totally kick-ass in this game is RuBy's ability to just to really bring the noise to RoRo, to administer a little bit of mid-game pain. Getting vessels this early, though fun and makes you feel very sexy, can make you feel quite vulnerable against It's not going to make you feel vulnerable against science vessels, because you're really going to be the only one making them. It's going to make you feel vulnerable against mutalisks, because you have such a low medic marine count, unless you're really good about timing these barracks, and you know exactly when that spire's popping out because you have an SCV scouting, exactly the way that RuBy did. Unless all of that is the case, you're not going to be very comfortable against mutalisks coming out this quickly. I actually recall watching an anonymous Terran friend of mine do this in a game on Blue Storm where he went straight for this rush, and his opponent went for a 2-hatch, and the 2-hatch hit about when the science facility was halfway done. So it was like 10 Marines without range and stim, 1 barracks, and an almost done science facility against like 9 mutalisks. And I just laughed like really hard. I was laughing like constantly for 11 minutes. And again, the most important part of StarCraft is not to look stupid. So that's why I brought that up. Oh man, that was funny. Got some good memories from that, and I had auto replay on. Oh man, I should upload that one to Team Liquid so you can join in my giggles. Good placement right here with the missile turrets, the usual sort of thing. And look how hard RuBy's powering. And he's getting away with all this because he has that nice wall in, and because he's given up any early game pressure. So for instance, once the minimap reappears again, it has rematerialized. Yeah, because there's no mid-game pressure, this expansion is super, super safe. These don't have to get morphed. And look at RorO doing a little sneakaroo and getting lurkers. Whether he got lurkers or got mutalisks, it's most important to just realize how safe he is, because RuBy's sort of given all of that up. Good fake by RorO, convincing RuBy to build these extra turrets. And also, because these lurkers were the choice of RorO, RuBy's choice to turtle and to give up that early game pressure is going to bite him in the ass a lot more than if his opponent had gone mutalisk, because of exactly this sort of thing. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, I was trying to just keep the vomit down right there. So my apologies for that little belch. So generally, what happens early game is that Terran would move out like this, and everything would be fancy and fantastic. And the Zerg would kind of have to push with his Zerglings and Lurkers, kind of have to do some little skirmishes, maybe wander around here, maybe wiggle up along this lane, and then he'd have to position himself here. And once those Lurkers get in an arc here, Zerg is unbelievably happy because he can do whatever he wants over the rest of the map. But there's that little struggle to get up there. But notice how there's no struggle to get up here. He got to walk there. So these are the sorts of things you have to consider when you do this little slight variation that RuBy's doing with all sorts of ultra mad crazy powering, going straight for the science vessels, straight for the 2 barracks. And again, keep in mind from the Terran perspective, even by sacrificing so much of early game pressure and getting in this position, which is less than desirable, watch how Terran just puts the pressure on. Oh man, just incredibly cool game to watch. And also, if you're Zerg in this point, anytime you're playing Zerg, whether you're 2 hatching or 3 hatching, or if you're weird 5, 6, 7 hatching, doing that sort of thing, you always have to think about alternating building units and putting pressure and building drones. So here, RorO, look at all those drones wandering across the minimap. He's able to do that because he got these lurkers in a really nice position. If he hadn't had those lurkers in that nice of a position yet, he'd have had to do something like maybe make some Zerglings to push all the way up. Maybe his plan involved just sacrificing control here and putting lurkers at his natural and putting lurkers over here. But the most important thing is to note how he got these lurkers and Zerglings and ran up here, and now we have tons of drones coming down. There's another hatchery going down. We saw the Evo and the Queen's Nest going down. We see a Muta to scout. I've never just seen a Mutalisk just kind of hanging out, just checking out what's up. But because RorO is in such a wonderful, comfortable position, he doesn't really have to worry about that too much. This is something you'll see a lot when you're doing this sort of style, even if you have gone Mutalisks first, but the style where you do lots of powering, lots of sort of tentatively pulling back in the mid-game and trying to hit the Terran right at your front, you're going to notice you get a lot of Lurkers and not so many Zerglings, because you spent all those larvae on drones, and then you've built up all this gas, so naturally you're going to start building all these Hydralisks to spend it on Lurkers, and then you're going to be building upgrades, and then you're going to be getting Defilers, and you kind of skimp out on Zerglings, and that's exactly the way you want it to look. So these lurkers are going to pop up. This is just the usual delay, nothing too fancy going on here. You don't have to siege these tanks because there's no zerglings here. You can just easily get them to walk back. It's going to try to take out these vessels, but because RuBy got these super fast vessels, you can't really take him out. He's going to have 2 instead of 1 for the push. But yeah, these lurkers are going to delay, and now is when the Zerg starts building up Zerglings, if that's what he plans on doing. You know, Zerg could naturally build some Defilers and be fine. But let's say that the Zerg didn't have Defilers. Now is when he starts adding on the Zerglings after those lurkers. See, yeah, look, now we're starting to get some Zerglings in the mix. Now is when the Zerglings start to come out. But you go drones, and then you start getting a lot of lurkers, and then you get a lot of Zerglings. Usual sort of thing. I'm always tempted in these videos to start doing commentaries in the style of Bob Ross, you know, just being like, oh, these happy little Zerglings. Oh, yes, these lovely little lurkers just patrolling around in our happy little village at the bottom half. Maybe I'll do a nice relaxing one of those when I don't feel like I'm on the verge of vomiting all over the place. So yeah, see, I'm going to rewind briefly back here to this happy little Zerg base. So Zerg doing the usual thing. Maybe we'd like to see some lurker burrowing here, but there's just not enough Zerglings. So Terran doesn't even have to siege. He can just push forward real aggressively. So Zerg's doing the right thing, sort of spreading out. We have Defilers right on the way. And see, look, we're already getting another evolution chamber that's slightly earlier, not too much earlier, but ever so slightly, just a touch earlier than normal, because Zerg got the opportunity to build so many drones when he had that contain going on up here. So a nice duper aggro push going on. This 4th expansion is also quite early for Zerg. And not even a touch early. Pretty significantly early for Zerg. So as a Zerg player, I would say that this game is going according to plan. Oh yeah, look at this. Look how many drones are there. SCV is going to try to take down this Nidus Canal. Always take down Niduses at any cost. Hopefully not losing them to SCVs, because again in StarCraft it's so important not to look stupid, and that would make you look awfully dumb, wouldn't it? So yeah, always going to be trying to avoid a little bit of that. You don't really need a Morphous Sunken Colony. Just sending a Zergling or 2 there is gonna clean that up nice and fine. But yeah, from a Zerg's point of view, I'd be feeling pretty nice right now. I mean, I got my 4 bases up. This Terran, his mid-game push really isn't doing anything to me. I already have the swarms up, comfortably so. Look, I'm doing a flank. Oh man, I'm flanking. We haven't even hit 12 minutes yet. That's early. Normally Zerg's going to be trying to put the pressure back on Terran around 14, 15 minutes. But man, that's so early. But this is what's really cool about RuBy's build. That is a bunch of vessels. Normally, with the Terran push, the 2nd vessel is coming out right now, because you went 3 barracks, and then as you were adding on a factory and a starport, you got up to 5 barracks, and then when the push is coming out, it's timed based on when your first vessel comes out. So you push with 3 or 4 tanks, a bazillion medic marine, and then vessels slowly start stockpiling. But here what we're seeing is already quite a bunch of vessels, and that's going to allow RuBy to exert quite a bit more control over the mid-game. Also, incredible positioning by RuBy. Look at these overlords here. If you can't see it on the mini-map, overlords are positioned right here on the mini-map. There's a few here and here. This is exactly the way that RorO should be controlling his ground, and he's doing a good job of that. You can't really move into the center because Terran gets to have that, but oof, super good job. So look at RuBy already grabbing the center. Look, he just threw a handful of units down there. That's going to actually stop this army. It's going to force these lurkers to burrow, maybe force a swarm up, because look, we have firebats in there. Someone pointed out to me, actually it was Folon earlier, noted how many firebats RuBy continues to make in this game, and he's really good about it, and this allows him to maintain a fairly significant presence in the middle of the map, and it's largely because he keeps his opponent down to Defilers, Zerglings, and Lurkers, and only in small numbers, and that's what allows him to push forward so much. Once we start getting Ultralisks, and once our opponent starts really being able to push far forward, the Firebats are going to become less effective, but because RuBy ends up being so aggressive for so much of the game, he can make incredible use of those Firebats. That was a nice little tactic running in there, killing off the Nidus Canal. Always good to do to finish the work that your SCV at the bottom left started. Oh, see, building the Nidus Canal right there again. Really loved his positioning of that. Built it on the grave of that building. And this is the sort of thing that you need to start doing as Terran. Once you hit the mid game, is you're so used to keeping your army in a nice, tight, solid lump because that's how you push as Terran. Even in Terran vs. Protoss, that's how you do it. But once you hit the mid game in Terran vs. Zerg and you start getting a good vessel count, you need to split your army into little units like this, into little clumps. Maybe getting another clump down there. See, we see this little group right there? Wouldn't mind if any of that stuff moved down there. Traditionally, what Terran players do is they'll mine up along this lane and keep a slightly bigger clump, but especially if your opponent doesn't really have big attack groups, if it just consists of lurkers and zerglings and that sort of thing, you want to hit it early, and you don't need that many units, because all you're really trying to do is to force the lurkers to burrow, because you're going to run away anyways. So we have a dropship also going down by RuBy. A little unsure if I liked the way that dropship ended up going. I mean, also note the usual thing I point out. Look, attack over here, drop over there. Good job by RuBy to do that, but I'm not so sure I'm behind the use of this dropship. I mean, we see it dropping right now, and it's really effective. But what I would have liked a little bit more is if RuBy's army came down like this to here, defending the dropship all the way till it got here, and then if it cut over to the left. What we saw is RuBy's army just started here and went this way, and the dropship just went down and over like this. If you move with your army together like this, I call that forcing an opportunity. You create the drop path that you want to take, because you can't just rely on just blind luck. Just, man, I really hope I didn't get Scourged, and then when you get there, the Scourge are, bazillion trillion times faster than dropships, and you're not Protoss, you can't upgrade the speed of your transports, so you just kind of have to take it. Good to throw in some fire bats here, especially at this stage in the game. Still just Zerglings, Lurkers, and Defilers, so really anything that comes here is either going to be Zerglings or Lurkers that need to burrow. The Zerglings are going to get eaten up by the fire bats, and then the Lurkers are going to burrow, and then you can simply walk away. So here's that unfortunate thing that I pointed out, that this is the most defended expansion once you have your bottom half. So it's a little, it's unfortunate that RorO had to take this, and less unfortunate that he lost it, and that it doesn't have gas. Haha. This is incredibly good by RorO, the fact that he's doing this counterattack up here. That's exactly what you need to do. Whenever you are feeling as though you're in a tight spot, the tighter the spot you are feeling you are in as Zerg, the more the Terran is pounding your front down, the more important it is to do just a little teensy counterattack. Doesn't have to be drastic, just has to be something like 2-3 Lurkers, 8 Zerglings, and a Defiler. And see, now we're starting to see the importance of this ridge right here. The fact that RuBy, there we go, RuBy is just dropping right in here. And that is why it's so important to try to cut in between, just like that. Because now we've opened up drop paths and attack paths in either direction. And see, look at this. Only Zerglings and Lurkers here. So the Lurkers had to burrow, so the Marines just run away. And then they're going to run up here, they're going to kill this drone. Kill the drone, run up. Or maybe just try to cramp yourself back and let these medics just take it. But so right now, if we just stop and look at the minimap, look at where Zerg is. He's here in like this bottom 50th of the map, this little tiny fraction, and he's here in this little tiny fraction. Terran's not quite spread out as much as he'd like to, but really that's because he just moved his units here. He's going to naturally spread out, and only these few Zerg units are there that aren't really going to do anything. Not the nicest position to be in as that man. Oof. Oh yeah, RuBy. Ooh yeah, RuBy. Doing it. Getting it done. Look at it. Look how awesome that is. He just left with his whole army, going back to the center, getting center control, continuing to drop, putting on so much pressure. Oodles and oodles of pressure that he's dropping directly onto Lurkers. Don't necessarily want to do that, but still, it's the thought that counts. Yep. Scanning just to make sure there are in fact Lurkers there killing him and not some sort of funky bug. And alas, you cannot rely on that. So many vessels being added up. Tons and tons of vessels. And even though these dropships were a complete, pathetic, dismal failure, by all standard measures, I mean, Zerg didn't get the opportunity to move out, he still had to pull back. So that really shows you that even though sometimes you clearly lose on the money analysis, you clearly lost way more than those Marines did in terms of damage, it doesn't count this sort of position advantage that you can get in as RuBy. Look, RuBy wouldn't have had this amazing opportunity to be able to irradiate every single lurker there and every single defiler and do this sort of push if it weren't for those pathetic failure of dropships back there that actually drew these Hydras back. And look, the attack down here, look at this relentless pressure by RuBy. Look, dropping right over here. And RorO doing the right thing, trying to do these little counterattacks, but good job by RuBy of spreading everything out. Now let's just pause for a moment and talk about what we saw. So Zerg opened up with lurkers, so he tricked Terran into building turrets that Terran didn't want to build. Terran did that sacrifice of early game pressure to get those really fast science vessels. So the lurkers that RorO got were even more effective at containing Terran. So RorO got to expand way earlier than he normally would have, and get more drones and upgrades than he normally would have. That's a full hand of advantage for RorO. RorO's in a really happy spot in that early game. But because of the incredible decision-making that RuBy's made after that, look at this position that he's in now. Yeah, he has his 4 bases up, but to do what? To just hang out and hide and cower in fear like a... like something pathetic. I don't know, I feel sick. I'll think of something funny after the fact and tell you later. But man, this is just incredibly effective pressuring by RuBy. Really, really good. And the one moment that RuBy's letting up on this pressure, actually that's so awesome to watch. I'm actually going to rewind. So here is where the pressure is still going on. We just had this attack at the front. We've rewound just a little bit. There's a few lurkers up here doing some delay on this expo. Zerg's just now holding it off. So when Terran finally pulls back and finally lets Zerg up, watch this mini-map. Watch how Terran just oozes out into the middle of the map. Oh man, this is so cool to watch. See, here's this army, and then we see this stuff pouring down. Look at all this movement up here. If you can, the resolution's low, but YouTube's trying as hard as it can. So many units now. Look at this, flooding the middle of the map. Horrible place to be for any Zerg units. Yeah, we got these overlords trying to spread out, trying to get some control. See, look at this. Look at Zerg. He was finally feeling confident enough to move out with speed overlords to try to spot. But RuBy's already conquering that middle of the map, continuing to drop. I suppose I'd call this a little bit sloppy by RorO, the fact that he doesn't have Scourge there, even though he just got dropped. But even so, I mean, I think it's reasonable in a Zerg point of view to just be a little shaken up after that drop. Just got your economy going, just inched out, and another dropship sneaks its way down. Getting your vessels plagued is never so good. Be careful that you don't bring all your vessels somewhere. Sometimes it's easier to scan and you'll realize you only need like a vessel. And then you can just do that sort of thing and not worry about sacrificing. Here's something cool. Run into Dark Swarms. Run right into it as Terran because you have Sunkens and Hydralisks firing. Lurkers haven't burrowed yet. Look, targeting the Lurker, killing it. And if the Terran stays right here out of range of these things, these are completely defended. So that's why he managed to take out... Oh yeah, drones, killer drones. That's how RuBy managed to take out RorO's Nidus Canal. These just ran right into the swarm. That's something that we saw Nada do a lot in the early days when Zergs were just beginning to experiment with Dark Swarm, that completely overrated spell that should never be used in a real game. Yeah, that's how people used to talk about Dark Swarm. They said, why get Dark Swarm when you can just get Ultralisks and kill them? But yeah, now we see Defilers. Now we see that those guys were fucking wrong. Oh man, owned. But yeah, so here, taking advantage of some of that nice, cool stuff that we haven't gotten to see in a while. The Terrans taking advantage of the Dark Swarm. Always be a little bit critical of the Dark Swarm. Don't always be like, oh, I have to run away. Just think about some of the uses you can make on it. So the usual sort of cool stuff we see Terrans do. Attacking with units this way, mining up the back way. And here's one of these little counterattacks that I pointed out is oh so important. This is the sort of stuff that's going to win games for you anytime you're feeling a little bit cramped back. Just doing these sorts of counterattacks as Zerg clearly a mistake by RorO not to lead with an Overlord. Because you can. I mean, that's the reasonable explanation for that. If you have something that can lead, whether it be a speed Zergling or whether it be a speed Overlord, just you gotta do that. Because mines are going to be incredibly deadly at the end of the game. See, here's another one of these awesome counterattacks by RorO. Exactly what you need to do. Unfortunately, RuBy's been so good at pressuring the entire game that he's sort of caught RorO off guard. And notice how he's slowly working his way in. The defense used to be here, and then it got eaten back here, and now it's getting all the way back to here. Now it's like, it's almost up to the lip of this expansion. And this is really cool. Look, right as he's pulling back, we have another dropship sneaking along there. Haha, yeah. Too bad Scourge can't pass through Nidus's. Not so good for our friendly neighborhood RorO. So yeah, doing the usual sort of kill-offings. And again, great splitting up by RuBy. Incredibly good. Defending from those counterattacks, just doing cleanup from what the mines couldn't do. And this is a pain in the ass for Zerg, even though it didn't do much direct damage, didn't kill off a lot of drones and this sort of thing. It delayed these drones from mining, and it pulls units back. It's sort of invisible help that these dropships can do. Still good control by RuBy. Notice across this middle line, only a few attacks have gone up here that have gotten just snapped in half, and one successful attack here. That's the only aggression that we've seen RorO do all game long. And look, still making fire bats. Look how helpful they're being, running directly into the swarm. And sometimes people get a little overexcited with the fact they have fire bats. They run fire bats into the swarm to combat lurkers. If your opponent has more than, like, a lurker, you should probably just run back. I mean, unless you have, like, 10 fire bats against 2 or 3 lurkers. In every circumstance except for that, you should be really running away. And that's what I really love about RuBy's control in this game, is that RuBy is not suiciding fire bats in there. He's using the fire bats carefully to exploit the Dark Swarm against Hydralisks in there, and exploit the Dark Swarm against Zerglings and Defilers in there, while still being smart enough to run away from lurkers. Or as you should call them, to be cool, lunkers. There's a lot of cool ways I say things in StarCraft. So I call lurkers lunkers, I call scouts scoots, and I call Templar stormers. So these are some of the jargon that you should incorporate to help improve your IC Cup rank. I promise that'll help. They'll send you careening towards A+ if you just call them stormers. Sickest plague ever. Unfortunately, we don't get to quite see how gooey it is because his units are red anyways. But that was a beautiful plague that you gotta be real careful to make sure that you can get off a plague that juicy. Because unless a plague is as awesome as that, a Dark Swarm is almost always more useful. In fact, probably the #1 mistake that Zerg players who are just getting used to Defilers make is that they become obsessed with plague. And they'll actually lose because they'll have a completely reasonable defense with, about this many lurkers, and instead of throwing a swarm down and delaying this entire army, they'll throw a plague that hits 2 Marines, and then they'll lose all this stuff. You always need to be very, very careful with your planning of that. So also, let's just look at this mini-map. We have some units here from RuBy. We have some more units here controlling this ground up here, which is going to be instrumental for holding this top part, and now we're starting to see the already crappy map control that RorO had is dwindling. High vessel count, still being useful. And look, only a handful of vessels was needed there. You don't always need to have all your vessels at every single place throughout the entire game. In fact, we've seen Flash do a lot of this, where he keeps his vessels back here, and because he has such good map control, he just sends his vessels in when he needs them, and then sends them right back. Continued really good control, so as RorO, I'm starting to feel a little bit more confident because I'm getting to move a little bit farther forward, but I constantly need to reinforce with those Defilers. And look at this. Look at what RuBy's doing. As he was, this is the usual sort of transition that you see Terran players make. So first Terrans will, this is the early game, up to the first push. A lot of Medic Marine, and then leading up to about 3 or 4 tanks, then vessels, and then with that push out after the first vessel, we start to see some aggression from Terran. And then we have another vessel being added on, and another vessel, but for the most part, you stop making tanks at this point, and you add on more barracks and a second starport, and you start going heavy starports with medic marine. Slightly after that, you get vultures with mines, and then later in the game, about now in this endgame stage, you go back to getting a bunch of tanks, because you need the mobility early on. And if you spend any money on tanks, that's just free kills for the Defilers with Dark Swarm. But later on, when the armies start getting bigger, and you actually do have a nice sizable medic marine vessel group, you don't really need mobility anymore. What you need is muscles. That's where we go back and start adding in all those tanks. And these tanks are going to be a nightmare for the... normally they'd be a nightmare for Ultralisks, but now they're going to be an even bigger nightmare for the Hydra mix that's in there. Look at this great unit split. We have the already killer push here, but we have enough units here to do a little spreadaroo to look sexy and still threaten to kill in a little bit. Hope my chair's been creaking too much. I mean, listen to it. Yeah. Oh man, this chair is actually a real pain in the ass because a wheel fell off it. So anytime I lean, it sort of topples on one side, so I'm actually slowly pulling all the muscles in the left side of my back because I'm just trying to constantly balance myself. But I'll endure it for the casting purposes. Yeah. So now this is the part where we're starting to see Zerg feel more nervous because he's had these 4 bases all game long, but if you look at the mini-map, running low on minerals here and running low on minerals down there. And not much has been done. Sure, he's prevented Terran from taking this expansion, but Terran has conquered the top of the map. So Terran can start doom pushing all the way forward, and still have enough units to spread out. All this is because of that incredible work that RuBy did in the early game, or excuse me, in the mid game, just bouncing back and forth here, cutting in here, dropping back there, sneaking these dropships along the backside, coming in the front here, killing off the Nidus there. So much action going on from RuBy. Nice rally points here. Nice squeaking on my chair there. And look at the way he's spreading out these units. So he has some units here to watch for drops, and also to cut off any expanders going here. I guess that's what I'm calling a drone now, is an expander. Oh, baby. Yeah, so then we have some more units up here that are helping to defend these top expansions. We have even some units up there doing a little work. And here is the death push right there, pushing down. Oh my god, look how many tanks there are. Oh, man. Hopefully we'll get to see what I call the Terran backhand, which is, you know how when all the tanks siege, so like they always siege up at like that one angle, but if you siege all your tanks at the same time, they all turn and they just go and they just like smack. It looks like all the tanks are backhanding down the whole army. This happens especially in Terran vs. Protoss against a bunch of dragoons, just like the Terran backhand. It's so sick. Just wanted to point that out, just because I want more people to talk like I do. Always important to talk like Day 9. He knows things. So here, one of those ever so important counterattacks, and we immediately see how important it is to have units positioned the way that RuBy does. So look, he comes up here, he's killed off the Defiler already, we have some more units here. And I mean, if I'm Terran here, I just simply look at the minimap and go, oh cool, blob of red. Click there, look, we already have another blob of red moving in place to counter the blob of green. Alright. Good mix. See, just a handful of firebats here and there, helping to keep the armies crushed. Yeah, and see, the firebats did die, but if there were more Zerglings here, as there were in the beginning of the game, and remember those firebats are from the beginning of the game, or even if the lurkers died and it was just Hydras and a Defiler with Dark Swarm, that firebat can be really, really helpful. And see, look at that, look how dead everything is in there, thanks to the Terran backhand. That's what's especially nice about once you have this really nice mobility, to get this many tanks, because it is impossible to break. You can have infinity Hydralisks, and 8 tanks will kill all of them. Believe me, I've played on BGH. It happens. More really nice map control. And look, even as this Death Army is moving more and more south, we have more units blobbed there, we have these units blobbed, we have these units still here, we have these units still here, and look, we're almost making an arc of just taking 12 units and boxing them and sending them out there. Relentless control of the center. Absolutely incredible to see in action. You can do it a little more easily when your opponent is going for Hydralisks like this, instead of transitioning into Ultralisks. And I do think that this sort of Hydralisk stuff is a choice. Obviously, Ultralisks are better on some maps, and going Hydra Lurkling is a little bit better on others. But in a lot of circumstances, this is a choice by the player to do this. And when he does make that choice, you can respond by spreading things out just a touch more. Against Ultralisks, you need to keep them together a little bit more because you want to be maximizing the amount of damage you're doing against the Ultralisks and minimizing the amount of damage the Zerglings are doing by being able to surround. So yeah, you feel clever, don't you, Zerg? You may have eaten into the Terran army a little bit, but we have like 900 barracks, I think, here making. Close to like 400 supply worth of Marines and a medic. So not too much is going to happen from this sort of aggression by Zerg. I mean, he's doing what he needs to do, right? He's trying as hard as he can, but Terran units are sprawled all over the map because Terran was so good at pressuring in that mid-game of just slamming Zerg's face into the curb that there's not so much that Zerg can do. And now back with more pressure. I love this. As opposed to just pushing and trying to kill off his opponent, doing more of these sorts of drops. Nice targeting there, managing to kill that off. And even though this isn't going to do as much damage as he'd like, RuBy does get the opportunity to start moving forward here again. Well, maybe he is going to get to do more damage. Oh, no, I spoke too soon, so everything is in fact dead. And this guy is getting close to dead. So here comes yet more units. Nice little groups here. Look, even leaving a vessel there. Incredibly important, because, again, so many Zerg players who know that they need to do those counterattacks are, in fact, only going to bring one Lurker. Let me try it again. Only going to bring one Defiler. So if you just have one vessel there to kill things off, it's going to be instrumental. And see, here's the first drop that RorO's been able to do because RuBy cleverly positioned units right there. And they've only just now died. So this is some of the first semblance of pressure that we're seeing RuBy apply. Or excuse me, that we're seeing RorO apply on RuBy. Sorry, I'm getting a lot better about not saying the wrong name, but when I'm watching RorO versus RuBy, it's a tough sell. It's a tough life I lead, just commentating these StarCraft games with all you friendly neighborhood fans viewing. Thanks so much again, everyone, for tuning in. Always appreciate it. Nice job by RorO doing these sorts of things. Because Terran can't really defend these expansions with units, they have to defend it more with center control. Being able to just squeeze Lurkers in is actually a lot easier, and you can delay these expansions way more effectively than you would be able to in, say, Zerg vs. Protoss. So more units moving up for Zerg. Great, now RorO's looking like he's in a good position. He's finally getting to advance forward. He's desperately taking this expansion on the right and the left, and that is quite desperate. We even see this pure money expansion at the bottom that it's almost completely saturated with drones. But look at this food disparity. It's been at about an 80 food disparity for quite some time, maxed versus about 120. It's closer to 70 right now, but it's been almost 80 for a very long time. This is really good by RuBy to still put pressure on with dropships while he's dealing with this sort of push up here. Once the lurker numbers dwindle, these Hydralisks are going to be eaten alive by these tanks, so not the biggest stress. That's one thing that's nice about tanks, is that they help so much for defense. I mean, normally you just have to run away from Dark Swarm, but Hydralisks now just get under Dark Swarm and still eat shells. You know, a good question I think that it's very natural to ask is, it seemed like RuBy, this handsome gentleman on the Air Force Ace Pro team, it seems like RuBy was in beautiful control and was just absolutely smashing friendly neighborhood RorO. But what happened? Why is it that RorO is able to come so far forward? I think it's because with this push, when it happened, RuBy, and it may have been because RuBy scanned and RorO was being a little bit better about scourging areas, but RuBy wasn't quite able to do that bounce back and forth action once he pulled back. And I think that as he was pushing forward with his Doom push, he should have been trying to maybe squeeze in here with dropships, maybe go down and over and down and over. Or maybe even, instead of having units positioned like an arc here, just move down more with the units here and move down more with units here. Just because positioning is is fundamental to strong Terran play in the mid game. It's like what you do in order to keep Zerg freaking out. So, usual sort of thing. This is why a mobile army is so helpful, is anytime anything gets isolated, you can just sprint after it, and you have no fear of losing it. We see some extra hatcheries being added here by RorO. We're looking at the money count. RorO's money is still very, very high. I always say to keep your money, like, under 500, but let's stop for a minute and suppose that your money is over 500. Like, it's at 1,200 the way that RorO's is, and he started to spend money, and he just can't keep it down. A lot of people try to keep their numbers right. Like, for instance, a Terran player is very used to the following numbers. 6 barracks, 1 factory, 1 starport, and then 2 bases. And they're just making out of those. But what will happen is, when that Terran player starts building up money, he won't add on more barracks to push his money back down. He'll keep it at the right numbers. Feel free to add more barracks, more hatcheries, whatever you need to just keep that money down. It is far more important to build more than you need because you had shitty macro earlier than it is to hang with like 1,000, 2,000 minerals because you had bad macro, and then have good macro for the rest of the game and keep that money constant. You want to figure out a way to make it go down. It's totally okay, the fact that RorO is adding on those extra factories, those extra hatcheries there. So here we have more of the mobile army giving RorO a lot of trouble. We see some Firebats able to do quite a bunch of damage here. And this is a really interesting choice by RuBy. He's going straight for this expansion here. Even if this was dying, even if RorO was managing to swing it back in his favor and kill all of RuBy's stuff, I still think this is a correct choice by RuBy to advance here. See, now we're starting to see him do the tactics he did before. Look, drop here, failing miserably, but pulling units back. God, this is the squeakiest chair, Jesus. Ugh, yeah, but pulling units back by dropping here, and then RuBy's able to get a position up here on this high ground. And again, as I even mentioned here, if Terran has control of this high ground, suddenly this entire ridge is just prime meat for dropping. Delicious, wholesome Los Angeles tap water. So, getting a little bit of flank action. See how that Firebat was so helpful? Really important just to have a few Firebats. And because they're so important, we give them an extra special defensive matrix and a pat on the back. Uh-oh, RorO, not so good for you. And see, look, this relentless pressure by RuBy is finally starting to pay off. I do think it was okay to add on all those extra tanks and try to do some pushing forward here, but I think you should have maintained this mobile presence in the middle a little bit longer, because he could have even prevented RorO from getting that expansion over there. Because look now, with this sort of mobile army, RuBy still has this massive death troop coming down. Excuse me, this is where all the tanks are, this is where everything else is, and wouldn't it have been nice if that death troop had come out when something like this was going on? Oh yeah, that would have been sweet. So, oh my god, we're at 498 viewers. Hopefully, like, 2 more people will join. So that way, oh yes, I just hit Magic 500. Okay, I'm just going to do a little dance. I'm just going to, like, just celebrate. Yeah, for those of you just tuning in, you're the 500th viewers. Okay, it's 498 now. I'm done. Let's go back to the game. So yeah, so he's swallowing, he's gulping in bitter defeat because RuBy just played an incredible game. There was no luck, there was no BS. There was just straight up awesome, resoundingly baller mid-game pressuring. And because that was an extra long game, because we've been going for about 50 minutes now, we want to take an opportunity to just jump right in and take some questions. So, yeah, if you guys want, feel free to ask anything. I made it through. I didn't vomit, so that's a positive thing, I think. So, yeah, so Zubins asks, are there any drawbacks to having more Firebats? Why don't we see pros going for this type of play more often? I think it might be a little bit fake of me to be like, oh, look at RuBy with his, revolutionary Firebats, because I think a decent amount of pros still do incorporate solid amounts of Firebats into their play. The reason I wanted to emphasize it is because it was really clearly there all game long. The obvious downside to it is that you need to make sure your opponent is in that lurker that Lurker, Ling, Defiler stage, because that's when the Firebats are most effective. Because if your opponent gets too many Hydralisks or starts getting Ultralisks, you just become a not effective army. You have these Firebats that can't really do too much. They can do some, but not nearly as much as some extra Marines. And plus, you save gas if you don't get all those extra Firebats. So that's another thing to note. Okay, so Vindication asked, do you think RuBy would have had a more successful push with the tanks had he mined off the side that he wasn't attacking on? Mine lower, mid, and push west. Yeah, I think these sorts of things are really good to think about. Yeah, I think it's really good to do a lot of that sort of mining stuff, like if we go back to the main screen. So if I just want to make sure I'm reading Vindication's question correctly. So you don't see anything, but that's because I have a text overlay. Do you think RuBy would have had one? Yeah. If he planted some mines down here and mined up this region, then yeah, I think that would have been useful. Or even alternatively, just positioning units like here and here to make sure there's no counterattack as he pushes. I think either one of those would have been equally fine. I mean, the reason that naturally you'd want to be going for something like units instead of mines is because all your factories are making tanks. You don't want to stop making tanks and start making vultures because you're trying to get tanks to do a huge ass push. So yeah. So SOC asks, why did RorO never try to counter into RuBy's main? Excellent question. Right here, we see that here's the rally point of RuBy, specifically designed so that RorO cannot get in to RuBy's main. If there was an attack up here, what happens is some swarms happen. Some units go here, some units go here, and about now the Defiler dies. The rest of RuBy's army comes up here, and then from above and from the side, and RorO's army would get completely and totally surrounded. And the reason I like that question so much is because it illustrates how awesome. It appears we had a little bit of lagaragaroo. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to mute this chat. I'm going to take just a handful of last questions, and hopefully it's not lagging too much now. And I'll just split this into two parts. We're just going to have like 5 minutes of Q&A, so hopefully that's not too big a deal. So yeah, let's just scratch that little part that itched because I grow such a thick, manly beard that it itches. It itches a lot. Because what do you think else is happening? Hairs are pushing their way through my skin. I'm scrolling through all the questions, and see, right now I figure it's a good idea to open it up for questions, let them all come in, and then stop it, and then scroll all the way through. Haha. So Unknown asks, do you think a well-placed... Oh, yeah. I mean, I have to answer this question. Do you think that a well-placed Scourge to defend against RuBy's drops would have changed the game's outcome? Well, let us look at the map. So let's switch on over to here. A lot of the drops that occurred were those sort of sneaky ninja drops where they came in like this, along this edge. And I think a lot of the reason... that any drop is effective in any matchup, but especially in Terran vs. Zerg, is because the Terran player created that drop path or created a dropship opportunity. And that's probably what I should focus on saying, is a dropship opportunity. Because normally what happens is something like that, RuBy will move along down here, and then a dropship will follow in and go like this, and then the main army will come up here. And that drop path is entirely secure because it's where RuBy's army just walked. But this one may have looked a little bit luck-ish, I want to say. What I think's happening here is that RuBy's coming up here and attacking, and there's all these Scourge that are going to be here trying to gun for these vessels. And he can maybe even bait vessels, bait the Scourge over, and then start slowly pulling back. And that's what allowed those dropships to sneak all the way in like that. So I think that those drops, which actually probably did the most damage in the game, would have been... I think that those were forced opportunities by RuBy. I think he set himself up in order to make those as effective as they were. And honestly, he probably just scanned, saw no Scourge, and then moved in because I bet that if he hadn't seen any Scourge, he just would have gone back the other way and gone through the mid. Also, I think the one drop that maybe I would say was probably a little bit luckish was the one that ended up dropping right down here into the main that really pulled a lot of troops back. After that, when you have the other two dropships coming in along with that, there were units here defending those as well. But that first one probably should have had some Scourge there. I really think that as Zerg, I think it's important to have you have Scourge patrolling here and then an Overlord poaching along the edge. So, you'd have a line of Overlords like this, and then one up here at the corner of these minerals, and then you'd have Scourge patrolling here, and definitely some Scourge here, and maybe even an extra 2 Scourge right here at the mouth of each expansion, I think can prevent a whole lot of those dropship shenanigans, and also you have some Scourge available to deal with any science vessels that get too out of the way. So that was Chosen's question, so yeah. Going through. So Clockwise asks, why are pros starting to get fast vessels and be more vulnerable to muta harass? Is it because of the mid game pressure? I think that has a lot to do with it. I mean, always the structure of the map is going to inform that sort of decision making quite a bit. Especially if we look at this structure. I mean, this is ideal for having really good mid-game control, and also kind of demands mid-game control, because even though it's a pretty big even though it's a pretty big middle, it has a circular dynamic to it. So you'll see that a lot of times a Terran army can be here, and if Terran doesn't have extremely good mid-game control, Zerg can just swing around here to the side, or as we saw, we can see a lot of stuff swinging around here up to the top. So we need to have a lot of units in order to maintain control here. So I think getting the vessels early to force super good mid-game control for us as Terran is essential. So I think that has a lot to do with it. No Face asks, should Overlords have been used to drop on the Terran main more often, like Lurker drops? I don't think he could have even... Oops. Sorry, I want to make sure you see my face when I answer that question. I don't even think he had a good opportunity to do that. And let's go look at the map to see what I'm talking about. So to get to the main, we have really 3 options. One's from the top here, one's up here over the ramp, and one's up here across the natural. We have a whole bunch of turrets here, and for a while we had a lot of Terran units here. This is the rally point, and Terran also has an expansion here with a bunch of units. So really, anything coming from this edge is going to get killed, and any Overlords wandering through the middle, not only do they have to get through these units in the middle, but also there's a bunch of stuff here. And this is perhaps the only reasonable one, but there's turrets and units in the way, so really I don't even think that RorO had the chance to do that, and I think that's really good planning on RuBy's part, to make sure that he had a really well-defended, solid little triangle that he was controlling, as opposed to some weird spread-out line that would be really hard. So Hoofguard asks, against so many tanks, what unit composition should RorO be striving for? So, okay, so this is a little weird way to answer this, but the solution to that many tanks is to have already been at such an economic advantage as Zerg that you're able to wear it down. Because a max Terran army that has a giant Medic Marine club, 6 vessels, and 10 to 12 tanks does not have a counter. It is an unbelievably semi-invincible army. You could say, oh yeah, well, you just get a few plagues off, but you have 12 tanks you have to get all the way up to, and they're probably going to be spread out. There's a lot of room for those Medic Marine to maneuver around. So the idea is, if I'm in this situation where I'm against this big army, I just need a lot of stuff Doesn't matter if I'm going Ultra Zergling Defiler or Lurker Ling Hydra Defiler. I just need a lot of stuff so I can keep swarming and pounding it down. In a sense, those tanks are the visual manifestation of exploiting the economic disadvantage that Zerg's at. So in other words, if I'm Terran and I see you having a really weak economy for a long time, I think to myself, yeah, if I just get 10, 12 tanks, then I win because he doesn't have a good enough economy to deal with this. So that in my opinion is the clear advantage of going tanks as Terran, and the way to deal with it again as Zerg is just to be very patient and just keep wearing it down. Because, they are kind of expensive if you're going 2 factories worth of tanks at that stage in the game. So we're just going to take one more question. I actually like Colossus's question quite a bit. How can Zerg take away Medic Marine's mobility in the mid-game? Haha. A great question to wrap up on because it sums up a lot of the way that Terran vs. Zerg is going nowadays. So, what's really happening from a Zerg's point of view is that Zerg is saying, I'm going to sacrifice mid-game control. You can have all the control and mobility that you want because I'm going to get Defilers, and I'm going to comfortably manage my own economy, and I'm going to rape you. That's what Zerg's thinking. It's the Zerg mindset. So, the way that you would counter the mobility or try to stop the Zerg the way you stop Medic Marine mobility and Terran's ability to move through the middle is one to just not go Defiler. You can do something like Hydra Lurker for a mid game, which I actually like quite a bit. I don't recommend this because it's kind of hard, but you can even stay Lurker Ling in the mid game for a little bit longer before you go Defilers. Especially if you open up with Mutalisks. If you have an army that's like 11 Mutalisks that are left over, and you have a lot of Lurkers, like 12 or so, 12 to 16, and you have a few control groups of Zerglings, you're going to have a really solid... sorry, some of those cheese that's trying to come up. You're going to have really solid control over the center of the game, and that will help combat that mobility that Terran loves and strives for. But really, I wouldn't say it's that big of a deal. I wouldn't even really worry too much about Terran's mobility. I think that it should be accepted as a fact, and the way you deal with it is try to just sneak around the sides. Even though it's mobile, it can't be everywhere at once. So you kind of chip up around the edges. A really great example of that is GG play against Iris, Game 5 of, I think it was the Dome Star League Finals, or maybe an Ever Star League Finals. It was Game 5 on Python. Unbelievable job by GG Play. He was behind on expansions, had 3 bases to Iris's 4, but kept swinging around and scooping in with these Defiler, Lurker, Ling armies, and ended up winning the game eventually. So, yeah, that sums up Day 9 Daily, number 21. It is, oh yeah, it's my 1 month anniversary. I've been doing this for 1 month, guys. Yes. God, it's sick to talk about StarCraft that much. So that's probably like 30 hours of StarCraft on the internet by Day 9, and that's going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Tune in tomorrow at 7 p.m., and tune in on Tuesday at 7 p.m., and Wednesday at 9 p.m. 7 p.m. every day, except Wednesdays at 9, and we're going to have some good things in store for Day 9 Daily. Thanks for tuning in. Cheers, everybody.